Thank you, Marguerite. So if you didn't get it, I'm kind of a language geek. That's kind of my thing. Joanne, look out. You're sitting next to Noreen. She invited me to speak. And guess what? I've been a member for 2 years. So what I want to talk today about is my love for brains. I discovered brains and their amazing capacity probably about 15 years ago, and have been in love with them ever since. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about brains, and I move. The reason I got involved with this is I was a teacher, which I said I would never be. I'm never going to teach. I'll never say never. So I became a teacher, and I was teaching languages because I love languages. And I remember speaking to many adults who said, oh yeah, I took French in high school for 4 years and I don't remember a thing. And I thought, well, how ridiculous is that? Because if you spend 4 years learning about something, as the teacher, I would like you to remember something. And so I sought out the best way to teach students so that they could learn. And so that's when, so I started looking at language through literacy. And because we learn to read and then we read to learn. And I thought if I could engage my students in reading in another language, perhaps they would become interested in learning and would learn more. And please remember, in the United States, when we teach language, we teach grammar. But the purpose of language is to communicate. And so I needed my students communicating in the language. And I always ask people, how many native English speakers do you know who speak perfect English? I don't know of any. And so the purpose of language is to share ideas. And so that's what I wanted my students to do. And so in doing my research, I'm gonna do next slide. Oh, would you? That's it, okay. So when I was writing my dissertation about reading in the target language, I met whom I consider a sainted man. His name is Dr. Stephen Krashen, and he is a professor emeritus at the University of Southern California. And he wrote extensively about a desire to read and how we need to motivate students and human beings in general to read, and that if students were reading in another language about something they loved, they would learn the language. And so I read almost everything that Dr. Krashen had written, and then I found that he was at a conference in West Virginia, and I was there in the front row, ogling at him. Oh, you are just a genius, you're an amazing man. And afterwards, I said, Dr. Krashen, could you please sign my conference program because you are amazing. But one of the things that he said at the conference was, sit down, have a nice cup of coffee, and read a book in another language. And he called it The Fountain of Youth. And so can you hit the next slide, please? So he was right, because you have to prep your brain to learn. How do you prep your brain to learn? Well, you relax. Clear everything out of that brain. You're happy. When I was teaching at Shepherd, I always said, I need my international students to be happy, because you can't teach an unhappy brain. Relaxed, feel safe. And a lot of the work that I did with the LGBTQ community in schools is to make students feel safe, because then you prep the brain for learning. And comfortable. And what happens when you are in that setting, in that state of mind, is your brain is flooded with dopamine and serotonin. And those two chemicals help things stick in your brain. So already, if you're comfortable, you feel safe, you're relaxed and happy, your brain is prepped to learn. Now, I did look a lot at ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and how they affect students in learning. And cortisol is that it's the stress hormone, but extensive amounts of cortisol in the brain can actually do physical brain damage. So it is so important to make our students feel safe, feel comfortable, relaxed, and happy so that they can learn. And I will go back to, I'm going to go to, his name is Daniel Willingham. He is a professor out of UVA, and he wrote a book called Why Our Students Don't Like School. They don't like school because it's boring. They don't like school because they're afraid. They might be afraid of other students. They might be afraid of teachers. They might be afraid of getting in trouble, but they don't feel safe. In many instances, they don't feel happy. And I don't know how long you've ever sat in a student desk, but they definitely don't feel comfortable. And so, how do you learn? How do you learn? And Dr. Willingham points to, if you ask a teenager about a television show that they watched 6 weeks ago, they can tell you intimately details about that show, especially if it was a comedy. So they remember they were at home, they were safe, they were comfortable, relaxed, and happy, and their brains were primed, and what they learned was the material that was in that show. And we don't set students up to learn that way. Another example that I'm going to give you is my granddaughter, and my favorite title is Grandma. Well, actually, my grandchildren call me Nunu. My daughter called me when Chloe, my granddaughter, was in kindergarten, first week of school. Mom, what am I going to do? Chloe hates it. She cries in the morning. She does not want to go to school. And I said, Tiff, you got a big problem, because we got 13 more years of this. And so you got to keep her in school. What is she doing? Well, the school that she was attending was one of the top 5 elementary schools in the country. And my granddaughter hated it. I'm a lifelong learner. I wanted her to be excited about learning, but she hated it. They were rated that high because of their test scores. And so they were practicing tests every day. Chloe sat at her desk, uncomfortable, doing something that she didn't want to do. She didn't see any benefit to doing it. She was not happy. She was miserable. And so my granddaughter was not learning anything. Fast forward to October of that year, my son-in-law was transferred to the firm's office in Atlanta. And I told my daughter, put her in private school. Do not put her in public schools in Atlanta. And she said, Mom, we're going to put her in public school. And so after about 3 weeks of school, I called and I said, Chloe, how's school? No. I love it. I love school. Nunu, there's a kitchen and we play in the kitchen. And then there are big comfy chairs where we sit to read. And sometimes the teacher reads to us and we're all on the floor listening. She is so funny, Nunu. I love school. And she continues to love school because of the district she is in. My only concern is that it is a charter district in an extremely wealthy area in the Atlanta suburbs. I wish that Chloe's school could be replicated throughout the country. And I will tell you that her middle school has a full-time orchestra teacher, a full-time band teacher, a full-time teacher who is half orchestra and half band, a full-time choral teacher, and a general music teacher. They stress the arts, and as a result, the kids love the school. So next slide, please. So when I'm gonna move, I can't move, hello. So when we're learning something, the neurons in our brains are firing off, but they're sort of firing haphazardly all over the brain. Whoa, that was new, that's new, okay. I'm happy, so that's a good thing. That part of my brain is all triggered. And whoa, I learned something new. And then we repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. And my brain begins to make neural coalitions. And these coalitions are in an area of the brain so that a multitude of things triggers the memory. I am happy, so that's activated. I'm doing something over and over again, so those neurons are all connecting. So once I develop neural coalitions, I remember. Frederick Reeds had a book called, I forgot the name, it's called Why We Remember, and it's written by Dr. Rangan, I wrote it down so I would remember how to spell it, Ranganathan, and he is out of UC Davis, and he writes about why we remember certain things. And we remember certain things because of neural coalitions. So you have a bunch of neurons fired up in the same area, and many things can trigger all of those neural connections. And so that's why sometimes when you go back to a place where you had a very positive experience, you suddenly remember that coalition lights up and you remember where you were and what you did. And a few years ago, I wanted to go back to my elementary school. And so I rode back in the area, and as I was driving down the streets, I remembered the names of the kids I played with who lived in those houses. And so being in that space ignited my neural coalitions. So it is, and I need to say his name correctly too. It is, see, this is what, it's Hebbian theory. And Hebbian theory says that during learning, neurons fire randomly, but when we experience things over and over again in different ways, I'm going to talk about that in a second, we form these neural coalitions. And so it's the firing of neurons together that we want. Next slide. So read a book, not online. Studies and statistics show that we remember what is written on paper. We can touch it, we can smell it. Oh, I've got lots of neurons going now. I've got my sense of smell, my sense of touch, my eyes are seeing things. I often tell students who are learning another language to get the book and get the audio book. Because when you have both, you have a multitude of neurons firing at the same time. And so your likely memory increases, the likelihood of memory increases substantially when you have all of those neurons firing together. Reading books because they are physical, telling stories. We learn through stories. And David Brooks wrote a wonderful book. If you haven't read it, it's called The Social Animal. And David talks about how we as human beings, our brains need the presence of other people. And so when I'm coaching teachers, I say, you need to circulate. This is like really bad having to stay up here. I should be circulating and I should be touching. I'm gonna do an example. Okay, I'm not in the screen. So this, when you do this to a student, good job, good job. You've got all sorts of neurons now firing all over the place. And the child is going to remember that experience. The touch, the sensation of the human touch, the human presence, the human voice, the intonation of that are all firing different neurons. And so the likelihood of that child remembering something has substantially increased. Just in a touch, just in a good job, just in presence. And so I want to go back to Dr. Ranganeth's work and how he talked about what when we remember things that we are learning. It has to be important. I have to know why I'm learning this. And so when students are learning math, if they don't know the why of it, it's not important. It's not important. It doesn't mean anything to me. So, okay, teach me this algebra. I'll do well on the test. But in 20 years, I won't remember any of it because it doesn't mean anything to me. Students learn through experiences, doing things. Chloe loved being at the kitchen set. She loved being on the chairs. She loved engaging with other students. Experiences. I have talked to so many teachers who will play. Play is a great way to learn, and that's why children do so well with it, because they play. And so playing is a great way to learn. Remember, you're happy, you're safe, you've got all these good things going on, so it's going to work well. It has to have a reason. It has to be something different. Oh, this is cool. This is different. I'm going to remember it. Or this is very much like something I did, and so I'm making that connection. So I have to feel connected to the material. It has to be exciting. It has to be fun. We were just sitting at the table and I was saying when I was teaching for the public schools, I said that my job was, I did 3 stand-up comedy routines every day. Because you have to be engaged to learn. If you're not engaged, if you're not open to the idea, it has to be important, it has to be fun, it has to be engaging. And when I'm engaged, I learn. And so we need all of those things. The other thing that I found was fascinating in Dr. Ranganeth's work, and I've seen this repeated, is we need to make mistakes. We need to make mistakes and learn why we made them. I need to understand what I did wrong. And then the next time I know what to do. When I was in my doctoral program about language, French is my second language, but it's my closest to my first language. And I had studied Spanish. So I knew if I were going to go into an immersive program, I needed to do something with Spanish and not with French, because I had to work a little bit harder with my Spanish than I did with the French. And so I went to Argentina. And I stayed with a woman. She kept saying she was my host mother, and I said, Nani, you're 7 years older than I am. You're my host sister. But she spoke no English, so I had to speak French to communicate, or Spanish to communicate with her. But she wouldn't correct me. And I said, please, Nani, you have to correct me. I have to know what I'm doing wrong so that I can fix it. And she said, but I understand you. I know what you're talking about. And I said, yes, but if you correct me or tell me a better way to say what I'm trying to communicate, then my language becomes better. And so we had this conflict in the apartment about, please, Nani, tell me I'm wrong. Tell me I'm wrong. I need to correct my mistake and I need to do it. And that's why as a teacher, I always checked homework for completion, but I never corrected it. My students had to correct their work. So we went over homework, but they had to correct their work. Because if I correct it and put a big red circle around it, they see a red circle. Oops. But when they corrected themselves, they learn. Their brain recognizes what they did wrong and knows how to fix it. And so our brains, when we fix those mistakes, we create new neuron connections to do that. So shared experiences, when we're learning, we learn better when we are with other people. And I teach online, but I can see my students. So my online teaching is synchronous. And so I'm able to talk one-on-one with my students. I can put them in breakout rooms. So it's not ideal, but it is a better situation than asynchronous learning. Next slide. That's the one we just did, right? Okay, all right, so think of your brain as a muscle. It's only going to get stronger if you work it out. And if you do any sort of physical exercise, you're exercising your body, exercise your brain too. And that's why Krashen says, read a book in another language. You've got to exercise that muscle. So they talk about staving off Alzheimer's by doing things like word puzzles, also the Sudoku, all of those things. Exercise your brain. You have to exercise it. And so I attended a workshop when I was doing my PhD study. I attended a workshop at Georgetown University with Dr. Michael Ullman. And Dr. Ullman is the head of neuroscience there. And he was talking about the brain, and we had cadaver brains out, and we were separating the gray matter to look at where language was stored in the brain. It was fascinating. And we were talking about memory. And Dr. Ullman explained it that you have two parts of your memory. The first is declarative memory. And declarative memory is where you're learning something and you might still need to be looking up the files, right? Oh, I know that. Let me get the file. Here's the file. Oh, there it is. I've got it. This is what I wanted. And then the other side of your memory is called procedural memory. Procedural memory is when you do things automatically. You know it becomes, it's rote, you know it instinctively. Like right now I'm speaking to you and I am not thinking about the tense of my verbs. I am not thinking about subject agreement. I am not searching for a vocabulary word. What I am saying to you is coming from my procedural memory. It's part of who I am. Dr. Ullman, I teach language. How do I get my students' language from declarative memory to procedural memory? And he said, here they are, the three most important words in language acquisition. And I would edit Dr. Ullman's words and say the three most important words in learning. Repetition, repetition, repetition. Repeat, 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 repeat. And that's that workout in your brain. So in doing it, remember, I'm happy, always happy, you gotta be happy. And then, oh, I'm comfortable, oh, here's my why, I've got all this, now let me do this 20 million times. So that I have, and each human brain is different. Each human brain will require a different number of repetitions. So as we always talk about, well, you know, they're young, they can learn a language so easily because the brain is just ready to do that. Well, the brain needs fewer repetitions at that age. At our age, we need more repetitions. We need a little bit longer workout with that brain. But does it mean that the brain can't do anything new? No. One of the examples that Dr. Krashen used at the conference we attended was the example of the octogenarian that he had spoken with, who was working on his 7th language. And he knew how to do it. He knew that it had to have meaning. So I was thinking about this. Let's say that you love Italy. I love Italy. Okay, I love Italian food. There's my motivation. I love it. Oh, now I'm going on a trip. Oh, maybe I need to say a few words in Italian. Now my brain is motivated. There's a why. Okay? I love things Italian. I'm so excited about this trip. My brain is primed. But I'm gonna need some more repetitions. So I need to find them in a multimodal format. I need to read, I need to write, I need to hear, I need to speak, and ideally I need to do to make it multimodal learning. I have no idea what time it is. Marguerite? 1:30. Okay, so just a few more things. I'm gonna give you an example of how I put into practice myself what I have been talking about. So in the summer of 2022, my dearest friend called me and said, Lois, I need a huge favor. And I said, sure, Pam, what do you want? What do you want? Well, I'm directing a production of A Christmas Carol and I need you to play Christmas Present. And I said, Pam, I'll give you a kidney, but don't make me learn lines. I can't do it anymore. I'm old, Pam. This is not gonna. Lois, I need you. What do you tell your best friend? Okay. So at the ripe old age of 62, I was learning lines again. And I managed to get through playing Christmas Present. And I thought, oh, thank God that's over. Summer came, new director called me, Lois, you were so good in Christmas Carol, we want you back. And I said, Scott, that's a lot of lines. Okay, I memorized them last year. I will memorize them again. So I'll just pull out my script because I have all of the Christmas shit. No, Lois, I'm changing your role. Oh, come on, Scott. What do I gotta learn a new role? You can do it, Lois. I know you can. So I played Mrs. Cratchit and I played the charwoman. Last summer, Scott called me and said, Lois, I'm getting ready for A Christmas Carol. I need you. Okay, Scott, what do you need? Well, I've come up with this really good idea. I'm having the script rewritten, and I'm gonna make Ebenezer Scrooge a female. And I said, oh, well, that's a really good idea. What do you want me to do? I'd like you to be Scrooge. I was like, Scott, come on. Every year it gets worse. Every year it gets worse. And he said evil words to me. I have faith in you. So I got the script and I started highlighting the lines. Scrooge has like every other line in the show. And I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? I'm gonna be in front of people. I'm not gonna know what to do, where to go. So I put my own advice into practice. I recorded all of my lines and I listened to them. And I listened to them while I was reading them. And then I would cover them up and I would say them again. And then I have two very large dogs. I have a golden doodle named Charlie, and I have a Pyrenees lab mix named Bandy. And they became my audience. I needed motivation. So I was delivering my lines to the dogs, okay? And I was getting most of it. And then when we went into rehearsals, I knew where to move. So I say this line when I go here. And I say this line when I pick this up. I was making it kinetic. I was moving. So I had motivation. I had my puppies listening to me. Ah, yes. What am I like? Letter. Credit. Anyway, so I was talking to the dogs. And then I was still struggling. And so I pulled out the old thing that I always told my students. Write it. Write it. And so I bought myself several spiral notebooks and I just started writing my lines. And after the show, the director told me, Scott said, "You were so worried about your lines, Lois, but I'm not really sure you missed a single word." So the learning, and now I'm 64, soon to be 65, but I remembered my lines, and I put into practice what I had been telling people for years and years to do in order to remember. Put yourself in a good place. Make yourself comfortable, happy, safe. Find something that has deep meaning to you, that you have a purpose for learning, and then repeat the hell out of it. And so I hope that you learned a little something about learning, and that you learned about your brain.